and mahalo to everybody for joining us for our March Marine Science virtual talk story with Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea. And we have some wonderful guests here to talk to us today about humpback whales in Hawaii. And so we're just going to get right into it. And so I'm just going to briefly introduce the two of you, if that's okay. And then when it's your turn, you guys can elaborate. But we have here with us Patty Miller, and Patty is the education coordinator for the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. And we have Ed Lyman, and Ed, you have a really long title. You are a natural resource specialist with the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary and acting as the regional large whale entanglement response coordinator for the NOAA Marine Mammal Health and Stranding Response Program. Whew. It's a lot of work you're doing, Ed. So thank you so much to both of you for being here today. Just for everyone, just a quick housekeeping. We are going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, please put them in there. And at the end, we're going to save time to have questions. So if you'd like to hold them for then. But without further ado, Patty, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Okay, thank you. Nice to join you guys today. As Jenny said, I am the Education Outreach Coordinator for the Sanctuary. I am actually based on Maui, but we work on all islands, do a lot of things with visitors. We have a visitor center on Maui, bring in a lot of students. It's really exciting. We're finally back open after this last couple of years of not being so, and but glad to be back into it. But where Ed works out on the water in the boats and with the whales, I am land-based and have a lot of school groups that come down to our site. So if you guys are over on Maui, make sure you come and check us out. My role here tonight is to give some basic information about the whales. I'd like you, while I'm starting to introduce it, to get a piece of paper and a pencil. We're going to do this as a teacher type of lesson here. I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to go through some kind of a fun PowerPoint of some kind of trivia questions and see how much you guys know. So we are talking about the humpback whale. As you can see, I've got the humpback whale in my hand here, little model of it. He's not very big in my hands, obviously. The whales are huge, as you know, and hopefully all of you have been able to get out on the water, or not out on the water on boats or on shore and see these critters. We've had lots of them around this year. They're starting to go back, at least on Maui. All of a sudden, we're hearing, man, they're starting to disappear on us. So let's start with, we're going to learn some basics about the whale to give you an idea of size, etc., of the whale and the parts of the whale that will help you as you go into Ed's talk. Now, are they seeing me on the big screen right now? Okay, so what we have here, you've got a piece of paper, and what I want you to do is to fold it into 3 sections. I'm having a hard time seeing this myself. Fold it. How do I get so that I just see me and not you?
So at the top of your screen, at the top right, Patty, there's a little button that says view. And if you click speaker instead of gallery, then you'll just see yourself. And that's the same for everybody. If you click speaker, you'll see just Patty when she's talking.
So I go to the view.
Yeah.
And I speaker.
Speaker, yep.
And I still see everybody.
Click speaker and it should just go to you.
Not doing it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead here and do this. Okay, you've got a piece of paper. I want you to fold it into 3 sections like this. Okay, so you've got 3 parts to your paper. And it was interesting when I first started teaching about the whales. It's like, okay, I need to know, a good one, Jenny, there. Yeah, good. She folded it in 3 parts, going that, hold it up again so they can see the direction they fold the paper. This is the hardest part of the whole lesson, okay, is to fold the piece of paper that way. It's the easiest way that I learned how to draw the whale and talk about it. Otherwise, I was drawing the funniest looking animals here. So the whole whale is about 45 feet long. Let's assume that with our drawing. So guys, each section is equal to 15 feet. So the body of the whale, main body of the whale, looks kind of like, oh, a cucumber, or some kids will say the banana, or a pickle. It's an oval shape. And I want you to draw in the first 2 sections an oval shape that looks like that. Okay, first 2 sections. That gives you the basic body. So the main body of the whale is equal to 30 feet. Okay, this is, you know, obviously some of them are bigger or smaller, but the average whale. Now, the last section of it is the tail, or the flukes is what they are called. And they would normally go sideways, but we can't draw it that way. So I want you to draw a tail, and I make such a lovely tail here. Okay, make your tail and make it fit that whole section. So the tail is going to be 15 feet this way. And so it equals, the whole body equals the 45 feet. And it's also, this is backwards. The tail is also 15 feet going average, going this direction. Okay. Now, there's some unique things about the tail of the whale used for certain things here. If you look at my model of my whale here, you're going to see it's got some coloration on it. So there's some white on here. Each whale has a different pattern on its tail. It might have white on there. It might also have some indentations of different shapes, little different indentations on the tail, but something that identifies the tail by itself. It's like your fingernails. And your fingernails represent, and I'm sorry, not your fingernails, your fingerprints that represent who you are. So I want you to draw some kind of pattern on your tail. So when the scientists are out there, the researchers are out on the water, they will try to take a picture of this fluke, and they put it into the computer and they record it, and they compare it to all the other fluke pictures they've got. And it's one way they can count the whales. If it's a new picture they haven't seen before, new flukes, they will assume or guess or hope that that is a new whale they haven't seen down here in Hawaii before. But it's one way that they can count the whales. I was up in Alaska on a research boat once, and the researcher got so excited because she recognized the fluke of a whale that she saw all the time down here in Hawaii. So, but it's one way that they are identifying and counting the whales. And Ed might go into a little bit more about how they are counting whales these days. Now, that's kind of the general body. Let's talk now about the mouth. And how big do you think the mouth is going to be compared to everything else? The tail's 15 feet. The mouth is probably going to be about 15 feet also. It's a huge mouth. So the mouth comes down kind of like this. The eyeball goes about 15 feet of the way back. Big, big, huge mouth. And it's got what's called ventral pleats that go underneath on the mouth here. And these pleats allow that mouth to open wide, wide, wide up. So that whole lower jaw can come way down. I'm going to show you some pictures of this, some real pictures of this in a minute. And as it takes a gulp to eat, it's got that huge mouth that is open. And one thing I always tell the kids, this is kind of the gross thing, it's got a tongue that is about the size of a small car. You can imagine that being in your mouth. So the mouth is about 15 feet. The tail is about 15 feet. We've got, let's stop here for a second. Does a humpback whale have teeth? And the answer to that is, Jenny would tell you, she can talk to me now, is no. So this is what they have, what's called baleen instead. And they've got big pieces of these that come down. They come down from the roof of the mouth. They are about, 6 feet, 8 feet long. They come down from the roof of the mouth. It's a little hard to see it right here. But they're made out of things that are like your fingerprints, your fingernails, I'm sorry, the fingernails. Kind of a hard surface, and it's got little hairs on the edge of them. And it's these little hairs that when they open their mouth and take that big, big gulp of water, that they trap the little fish and krill on these hairs. They take that tongue, that huge tongue, swirl it around and pull them off. And we're going to get into this a little bit more. This was actually taken off of a whale that had died up in Alaska. So this is the real thing. And what I have found interesting is that, ladies, you'll enjoy this, that in the olden days, they used to use some of this material. Again, it's hard. As in the styes, remember when the ladies wore those corsets that made them look really, really skinny? They had to have something tight inside, something inside it that helped pull them in. And they would take pieces of this. And I've always wondered, and then they must have taken them out though, at times when they washed it. I got and had a chunk of this in my car once. got it wet. Got home, the car just stunk. You know, it's part of an animal that had been living. So I assume if they were using them as part of that underwear piece, that they must have taken them out at times to do it. But kind of interesting. And Ed, if you have anything to add to what I'm saying, please feel free to jump in. Okay, he does nothing.
Good, Patty. You're good.
Okay, so let's go for another part to the whale. So we are missing the pec fins. Now, the mouth is 15 feet, the tail is 15 feet. How big do you think the pec fins are?
15 feet.
About 15 feet. Good answer there. Okay, so you've got a pec fin that comes up on this side, and you got one that's on the other side. And these are used, they're about each 15 feet long. I'm a little out of proportion here. About 15 feet long. They have some coloration on them also, but that color doesn't mean anything. It's not like the flukes on the tail that is there. They tend to use these pec fins more for steering, like if you think of your arms for swimming. These are used for more of the steering, and the power of the whale comes from right back in here where they have a muscle called the peduncle, very, very powerful muscle. And if you've ever seen the breach of an animal where the whale takes its whole body out of the water, this is where the power comes from. Think of that breach. The whale weighs about 45 tons. How does it get itself out of the water? I challenge you to get in a swimming pool or down in the ocean where you can touch the floor. Don't touch the ocean floor. How much of your body can you get out of the water? I'm lucky to get my shoulders up and my head up, but very, very powerful muscle that will get that much of that whale out. And when you see that happen, it is just an awesome sight. So one more thing is, or a couple more things, they have a very small dorsal fin, kind of insignificant. We'll talk more about this little dorsal fin in a minute. We'll come back to a little dorsal fin. Blowholes. How many blowholes does a humpback whale have? 1, 2, 3? It's got 2. So you want to put one on each side here. So you've got 2 blowholes. And then you've got the air that's going to come whooshing out of that blowhole. Okay? Kind of looks like a little flower on the top of the head. And then it's got what are called tubercles, like giant warts up here on the head of the whale. And we're going to come back and talk about those a little bit more in a minute too. Your basic whale, you've just drawn a whale to proportion. I've tried to do this with dolphins and other animals, and it's difficult to do, but for some reason, Mr. Whale here cooperates with it being the 15, 15, 15. So if you're doing this with, oh, great picture there, Jenny. If you're doing this with,
you're a great teacher, Patty.
Oh, Ed drew one too. Nice whale there, Ed. It's an easy way to draw it and to get across, and you'll come out with a more successful animal. There you go, Ed. More successful animal than if you just draw it freehand. So remember, break it into pieces. You got 15, 15. Just keep thinking in terms of 15 feet. Okay, now you're going to put that on your refrigerator to look at it later. But let's take a couple minutes here, and Jenny's going to run a PowerPoint for me. And let's go through a few things to get through some facts of the whale. And thank you, Jenny, for doing this. So, as she said, we are the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. And luckily, my title is not as long as Ed's. It would take forever for me to write his title and this on it. Our mission is to protect the humpback whales through research, conservation, and education. That is what we work at doing, and we do very well. We have a lot of different research projects that are going on. Ed, with his disentanglement and all the programs he's going to talk about. And then we do a lot of outreach and a lot of educating of kids with what we do. So next one. So today we're going to talk about the whales though. So why are they called humpbacks? And most of you would think, well, it's got a hump just like a camel does. Not the answer. They get their name because they hump their back when they dive down. And this is where you'll see that dorsal fin come up. So the whale, when you're out watching for whales, and you see one on the surface and it starts to dive down underwater, it will hump its back. The head will go down first. You'll see that hump come up, and then the tail kind of comes up and it disappears, and it stays down for a while, usually 15, 20 minutes, and then you might see it come back up again. So if you're out on a whale watch boat, you'll find that they kind of hang around for about 15, 20 minutes and hope that the whale's going to surface itself again. Obviously, sometimes it doesn't, but that's why they are called humpbacks. Okay, next one. How big is a humpback whale? This is a great example. They are about 40 to 50 feet long. I love this image because it really puts it in perspective with you. That would be probably a 6-foot man on the back there. And think of how insignificant we are compared to that whale. And I'm sure Ed can attest to this. He is underwater with these whales and has been able to experience this size of them. For kids, an easy way to compare it is the size of, if you click again, it should come up with a school bus, about the size of the big school bus. So when your kids go on a field trip, this is the biggest bus. And it's about the length of a bus, obviously not the width or whatever, but 45 tons, about 45 feet long, really big. Next one. So are they a kind of fish? And the answer is no. Next one. They are not fish. They are mammals just like you. You can keep clicking here, Jenny, and things will come up. They are warm-blooded. They have hair. They've got whiskers like hair. We're going to come back and talk about that hair. They breathe air. They are born alive, no eggs. And they drink or eat the mother's milk. Easy way to remember it. Whale, warm-blooded, they've got hair, they breathe air, they're born alive, and drink the mother's milk. So they are not a fish. A fish has gills that they can stay underwater. Now the hair, go ahead, I'm sorry. The next one, the hair, where is the hair? The hair is found on, remember I talked about those tubercles, those bumps you put on the head of the whale. These are the tubercles. They're great big bumps that are there. And this is where the little hair shows up. I don't know the significance of this. Ed, I'm curious to know if you have any idea what they are for. Is it a thing of sensing, or is it, do we know what that hair represents or what it does? And Ed, when you're underwater with the whales, are you able to see these tubercles up close?
I don't get that close.
You don't get that close, okay.
No, but I have, you zoom in and you look at your pictures afterwards. In the age of digital photography, you can see them. I mean, you can zoom in enough to see them. And to answer you, we think it's definitely sensory, and it's like micro movements of the school fish or the currents, things that might help them make last minute adjustments on the feeding side primarily, either find food or during eating.
Okay, cool, thanks. See, he's our expert. Okay, Jenny, next one. And next one, Jenny. Okay, they breathe air. Now think about this. You bring up the next picture here. Bring up the next one. They have 2 nostrils. They got 2 blowholes, which are like nostrils. And those are either open when they are above water, and when they go below water, they have to close them to keep the air, to keep the water out of them. Question we always ask the kids is, without touching your nose with your hands, can you, next one, Jenny, can you make your nostrils closed without touching them? I can't. Most of us can't do that. But they do have 2 blowholes. They breathe air. Okay. Next one.
I can. I can.
You can? Can you do that? Oh.
Yes, I can.
Okay. The humpback whales, they drink the mom's milk, and this is kind of a cool story. Notice the size here. Guess how big the baby is pretty much when it's born as compared to the tail flukes and the pec fins in the mouth. It's about 15 feet long, back to our measurements there. But the babies, you can go back, stick on the mom and baby. When they drink, this is really interesting. Think about it. Whales don't have nipples. Every other animal will come up and they'll suckle the mom through the nipple. Whales have slits on their underside, and the baby comes up and nudges that slit, and then the milk pours out of that slit and into the baby's mouth. I want to know, how in the world do the babies know to figure out where those slits are and what to do and how to feed? It's one of those questions of nature. They drink about 100 gallons of milk a day. That's an estimate of what they think they are drinking. So think of that mom that is producing that much milk every day. Next one. How do you spot them in the ocean? So if you're out on a whale watch boat or you're on the shore, there's different things that you're going to see. Next one. There are three main B's. Keep going. The blow. Next one. The body parts and the breach. Okay, next one. There's the blow. I've read, and Ed may have a different idea on this. I've read that the blow can come out about 300 miles an hour. It's a real big whoosh. I've heard it from shore, heard it while I'm on a boat. It is a very loud sound when you're up close to it. They're exhaling all of the air that is left in them. They tend to collect the whale snot, that moist air that comes out of that blowhole, and they can learn more about the health of the humpback whales and their DNA. And maybe Ed will explain later to us how they actually collect that, some of that, to be able to test it. Next one. Body parts. You might see there's the pec fin, 15 feet. And the whale may be sitting there, and in the tail flukes you'll see. You're going to see the spy hop and the head lunge. Okay, these are different activities that you might see going on, or actions from the whales. They'll flap that tail fluke or that pec fin up and down in the water. You can count it many times over. I'm not sure why they're doing it. It might be to knock off lice or dead skin that they've got on them, whale lice or dead skin. Or maybe they're just communicating with each other. They're having fun. Spy hop. I imagine they're coming up, looking around. What do they see? And the head lunge is actually two males fighting. So when the whales are down here in Hawaii, they will, the mating is one of the activities that happens down here. The whale out in the front is a female. And these two males are fighting over who's going to get to be the boyfriend of this front female whale. They will lunge on top of each other. It's like the survival of the fittest. They will keep fighting for that position till one of them gets tired, goes away. There are other whales underwater that are going to come up and challenge that whale again. And then, maybe the female will decide, okay, I like you, and agree to be that girlfriend, or she takes off. But this behavior, you can see when you see a lot of splashing out in the water, it quite possibly is this behavior that you're seeing going on out there. Next one. And the breach. The breach is really cool. There's the whale coming out of the water, and that's what I challenge you guys to do in the ocean or in the swimming pool without touching the bottom. How do you get your body up and out of the water? Really cool to see when you're out on, especially on a boat, and see that. Really cool. I think they're just playing when they do this. Now, we talked about the flukes, and here are the tail patterns. These are several different patterns that are here. The one up in the right-hand corner, number 2353, matches one of these patterns down below. Can you figure out which one is the same whale tail as is there? And I think because the screen is too low, you don't see the number. Jenny, can you point to the one? It is right down there on the bottom. That's a match. So they would be able to say, if they took a picture of that whale tail down here, it was first seen in Juneau. And if they see it down here, they're able to match it and say it's been here before. They'd be able to trace where it's going and figure out where it is feeding, where it is coming to spend the winter time. Next one. And where do they live? Well, they live all over in the oceans, but here you can go to the next one. Our whales migrate mostly between Hawaii in the winter and Alaska in the summer. Go back to that. Yeah. They migrate between the two places. They seem to know where they're going. They come back and forth each year. They go to Alaska to feed. We do not have anything for them to eat down here. We're not very hospitable. They come down here and tend to mate. The female will get pregnant. She will then go back to Alaska, spend the winter or the summer feeding. She will then come back down to Hawaii and give birth. So they've seen a lot of babies this year down here, which is a great thing. The mom then takes the baby back up to Alaska, teaches them how to feed, quits nursing them, and then the baby will come back with the mom and gets down here and it's like, I'm a teenager, and takes off and disappears. So again, they come to Hawaii, kind of like the tourists, to frolic and play, and except to eat, and then go back to Alaska and feed until they're ready to come back again. They tend to come down here starting in about late October, November, December, January is really heavy with whales here. And all of a sudden this month, they have started migrating back up to Alaska. I'm guessing they've got to be hungry. That's where our whales go. There are different pods of whales or groups of whales that go from different places around the Pacific, but this is pretty much where our Hawaii whales are going between. Next one. Now this one shows you a little bit better on the baleen. I tried to show you a piece of it. This, you can see how the baleen hangs, go back. The baleen hangs down. Can you go back?
Sorry,
It hangs down from the roof of the mouth.
it's auto moving. Sorry, Patty.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You can see the plates of baleen that hang down from the roof of the mouth there. And if you go to the next one, before it changes on its own, this is what they eat. Krill, little sardines, little tiny shrimp-like things. And that picture down on the bottom is that whale's mouth that is wide, wide open. You can see where those pleats are that I talked about. It's kind of like a fan. It opens way, way up. It takes a big gulp of water and takes in that krill. And we're going to see a little bit better of this, but you can see the size pretty much of that krill. In the top pictures under eating krill, all of the orangey colored stuff is actually, that's not the sand, that's just covered with krill that is there. And then you've got bigger sardines. Okay, now you can go to the next one. And in this one, it shows you how they're feeding. You see how big that mouth is open. They've taken the big gulp of the fish. And what they do is, it's called bubble net feeding. And the whales will swim around and around in a circle, huge circle. And they create this bubble net. I remember being up there years ago, and I was on a research boat, and we were filming. And these whales stopped right in front of us. And it was a group of them. And luckily they kept us out of the circle, and they created this big circle of bubbles, great big bubbles. They went counterclockwise. And when the circle closed up, as they were doing that, they were howling. It was a different sound than the singing that you hear down here. They were howling. It got quiet. And then all of a sudden, there were about 5 or 6 of these whales. They came to the surface with the mouth wide open and gulped that krill and fish that was there, and got to the surface. They spit out the water, sunk back down, took that big tongue and pulled the krill and fish off of the baleen and went about business again. And then they started all over again. As they're swimming around and around, imagine this. If you were to have a cup of water and you put some like parsley or pepper in it or something, and you swirled your finger around and around in that cup of water, you would accumulate, all of that krill and fish would clump together in the middle. And that's what they're doing with the bubble net. They're getting it all to come to the center as much as they can, and makes it easier to feed with it. Now the next picture, hopefully we can make this video work. Go to the next. Oh, could a humpback whale swallow you? No. This is kind of a cool part. That the back of their throat is very, very small. It's about the size of a grapefruit. So you can imagine they're not going to swallow a shark. They don't have teeth. They can't chew anything. We keep going. Well, that's okay. This is good. Now, go ahead and click on that. This is showing an example of, that's all the little fish and coming to the surface. Here's the whales coming out of the water with the mouth wide open, taking that gulp. You see how big that mouth is. When we were watching this, they would sink back down underwater. And about 15 minutes later, it would start all over again. And they'd start blowing the bubbles, create that net, and come to the surface. I don't understand why they don't get in each other's way here. They're such huge animals, but really cool. That is bubble net feeding that you see there. And as we're watching this, all of a sudden the whales all came to the surface, and they looked over to the side, and there was another group of whales over on the side of the bay. This is up in Alaska. And those other whales started coming towards us. It's like they must have heard them feeding underwater, going, oh, we got a restaurant over here. We're going to come join. Our whales came up to the surface, chased the other guys off. The other guys turned around, went the other direction, and our whales went back to feeding. It was the coolest thing to see. It was really an awesome experience, but that's how they feed. Next one. Oh, we got the video again.
Yeah.
And I love this picture. One of our volunteers figured this out, that they eat about that much, about 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of krill and fish every day. That's equal to 250 Big Macs every hour. So multiply 250 times 24, and how many Big Macs would you be eating? Makes me sick to think of even 2 Big Macs at one time. So kind of a cool way to get across how much they actually are eating. Next one.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Do whales make sounds? Yes, they do. They, you can go to the next picture. They, like I said, when they're in Alaska, they were howling was what I heard. When you're down here in Hawaii, you will hear them singing. And only the males really sing the song. If we can go back, yeah. They sing a song that's got certain patterns to it. It's kind of like a la la la, la la la, la la la, la la la, but a pattern, and it goes over and over. And over a year's time, that pattern will change a little bit. There's got to be a lead whale orchestra director that is changing part of it. And they're all singing the same basic song as they're singing the songs. The males, like I said, are the only ones that sing, and they do it in an upside down position. Now there's other sounds that they're hearing from the whales, but this is kind of the whale song, but upside down, and only the boys. I don't know why the girls don't like to sing. Next one. And we're going to go to Ed here in just a minute.
Patty, when it's auto advancing, so I'll just back click it when it does that.
Okay, I think we've only got 1 or 2 more left. This is the last one that we're going to do. So,
oopsie.
Threats to the humpback whales is down here in Hawaii. Their main threat would be tiger sharks, and this is probably when the whale is injured or maybe a baby. They're so much bigger than the tiger sharks. In Alaska, you've got killer whales, but people are the biggest danger of all. And a lot of it comes from the fishing gear entanglement that they face, and from ship strikes. And I'm going to let Ed take it here because this is what he's going to talk about and share with you what he does with these animals. So hopefully you learned a few facts about the whales. Put your picture on the refrigerator, and just remember how big these guys are. It's really cool. So guys, thanks for listening, and I'm going to turn it over to Ed.
Thank you so much, Patty. That was awesome. I call them for the technical glitches, but I think we got through that beautifully. Thank you so much. Okay, Ed, take it away.
Good, Jenny. Thank you, Patty. And so again, my name is Ed Lyman. I won't go through my title again. We'll save you on that one. But I try to be clever with my titles here on the presentations. And I did a cut above, a community-based effort to free entangled whales. So I'm going to focus on the large whale entanglement threat. Okay, that cut above though is referring to the community. They are the foundation of the effort. So I'm going to get to that, but I'm also going to cover some of the other threats that Patty mentioned, like the whale vessel contacts or ship strikes, and sprinkle in a little bit of that science that Patty also mentioned. I'll do my best here. Okay, and then we'll have time at the end. We miss something, we'll ask a question. We'll try to address it. Okay. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share my slide now and share my screen. Let's see, it's this screen and hit play. Okay, hopefully you see that title slide now I was referring to. Jenny, can you give me a confirmation?
Yep, you are good.
I'm good to go. Cool. Thank you. Okay. So as Patty mentioned, our mission statement here, covering the research, the education, and the resource protection. Yes, I'm going to focus on the resource protection side, but I'm going to dip my toe, my flipper, into the research side as well. Try to cover that. And so I'm heavy on imagery. I'm going to show you lots of video clips, lots of images. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to put you in the boat with me or with us. Okay. And I'm hoping these videos will play. That's some drone footage, by the way. Okay. So, and a big part of that resource protection aspect is what we call the health and risk assessment. We want to know how our whales are doing and the habitat, by the way. And then we're going to protect the habitat as well, the environment. And this is a good slide because Patty mentioned the use of fluke IDs. Boy, are they foundational. I mean, they are the ID of the animals. And you're not duplicate sampling, you get population estimates through that, movement patterns, all kinds of good stuff. And it's so benign. You just take a picture of a whale's tail when it lifts it out of the water, okay? But the things I really want to focus on here is down towards the end, that risk assessment, okay? And we'll do things like scar analysis and reports of animals that are sick, injured, entangled, things of that nature, and our response effort. I want to cover that as well. Okay? So I do want to give you this overview slide, this threat analysis. And I just, I mentioned ship strikes, I mentioned entanglement. There are others. So I've just sprinkled a couple more in there. Pollution aspects, but whether it's, actual physical aspects or noise pollution, things like that. That's a big one. Patty mentioned the acoustic side for whales. It's very important sense for the animals. The males singing the songs. Females will not sing, but they will use vocalizations, things of that nature. So they really rely on sound in both ways, okay? Transmission as well as receiving. So harassment, I will maybe mention a couple things there. If we get too close, too often, things of that nature. Competition, maybe with the feeding. Patty was just showing us the bubble net feeding, but fishermen are going for some of the same species. For instance, herring up in Alaska has been on the decline. This year is a bumper crop, I heard. Lots of herring. I think that the humpback whales, maybe they're leaving a little earlier because of that. The restaurants are serving a pretty good buffet of herring. And environmental changes. We hear about, climate change, things like that. It's not just us that's affected. Obviously, the whole planet and the whales are not immune from that. And entanglement. So again, the two I underline will go a little bit more detail in with the time that we have. So I'm going to start with the whale vessel contacts or ship strikes. Okay. By the way, I should probably have warned folks. I mean, there are some images here that, I don't know, they're not very happy. They're impacted animals, no doubt. But for the most part, we're going to have happy endings here. Again, our role, the sanctuary's role is kind of like whale doctors. We are in a certain aspect. We're doing our best for the patients. We'll do our best. Okay, so hopefully some happy endings. Okay, here's some prop scars on a humpback whale. And I want to give you the general sense of the reporting side. Okay, just take generalizations in here. Okay, the generalization is look at the amount of data we've been collecting over time. We're going back to 1979. Okay, and you see the trend has been increasing on the number of reported ship strikes. Okay, confirmed different cases. And some of the, by the way, not to get into too much detail here, but the whale numbers have been increasing. So part of it is more whales, higher probability, they're going to have more ship strikes. There is more effort. More people know to call in. There's hotlines now, and things like that. So effort changes things. And there might be more boats and more ship strikes, by the way. Okay, so a lot of variables. Maybe that's just a hint of all the difficulty and challenges we have in trying to figure things out. So I do want to point out, though, towards the end there, there's a little dip and talking about effort. COVID was, the effort base definitely declined. Fewer people on the water for a while there. So that's just environmental change. There was a big El Nino, a warm cell of water up north of us, the blob, they called it. And that really changed the whale's behavior, feeding capability. And boy, when you don't feed and you don't fill the fuel tank up, maybe you don't come to Hawaii. Maybe you don't make that 2,000 nautical mile one-way migration that Patty was talking about because, hey, the fuel tank is half full. You wait another year. So things like that can be factors. I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. Oh, I did have some numbers there. 142 confirmed report, 10 of them this last season, by the way, so far, okay, this current season. 105 overall have been self-reported. Someone knew they hit the whale. 32 were finding after the fact. 5 are dependent calves. So the mother was hit. And so the calf is potential victim there. If the mother dies, calf that young is going to die as well. Okay. So, okay. And by the way, speaking of calves, predominantly it's the youngsters, especially calves here in Hawaii. Even up, you get up in Alaska, the feeding grounds, it's going to be heavy with the calves and the subadults. So, I can make analogies here, just like humans. Kids playing near a highway are going to be more apt to be hit or something like that, or get themselves in trouble in general. They just, maybe that experience level is not up there yet. So it's part of it. Okay, they don't know any better. There's other factors. Speaking of to the calves here, Patty mentioned the 1/3 rule there, right? Applies in so many ways. and the calves only being about a third or a little less than a third of the mother, well, that's relatively smaller, obviously. And if you throw in a, I don't know, Beaufort 4 sea state, means there's white calves, it's rough out there. It can be hard to see the calves when they come to the surface, and they come to the surface more often than their mothers, okay? They're not gonna hold their breath as long, and mothers will rest. A smart mother is gonna rest and maybe stay at depth for several cycles that the calf is gonna have to come to the surface. So that, in short, is one example of how a calf can be more prone to a ship strike, and it happens. I'll give you some numbers on this season here. It's 2/3 of our known ship strikes are the youngsters, or the calves. So, and I'm going to give you a case history, mainly because it's current. It's not a happy ending, by the way, unfortunately. But just Sunday, we got a report of an injured calf, and so the sanctuary responded, got out there, and this is some of the imagery we got. There's mother and the calf in front, and you can see what happened. Well, you can see the injury on the tail, and the patient, our calf, is showing signs of distress there. But that's a ship strike. There's some additional markings there, and it took the tail away from the calf, unfortunately. There's the fluke ID. I put this there for a purpose to complement Patty and her introduction of the fluke IDs. So that's the fluke ID of mom. It's got a black core, some white on the ends. It's got 2 V notches on the trailing edge. Okay, I'm going to point some of those features out because we saw her the next day. The next day we saw her, and she was in a group that was basically, she was with the males. So we think she lost that calf that night, the night in between. And she went right back to, maybe I can get pregnant, and I lost that calf, maybe I can have another one. So interesting little point. Okay, and again, not a happy ending on that one, almost certainly. So, and the other thing I want to point out here before I move on is look at the mother. Look carefully. Part of the fluke is missing. Part of her flipper is missing on the right-hand side. She is herself a victim of a ship strike at a different date. So that's not recent. Those are healed. But she had been hit by a boat or multiple boats. So this is a real threat out there. I'm going to move on. And speed is a big issue. How fast you're going. It's all about, you detecting the animal maneuvering. It's about the whale detecting you and maneuvering. We've got 83 cases where the speed is known, and the average speed is around 10.5 knots for the boats that report, but they get up to 26 knots. Essentially, what I want to get at here is that the faster you go, the more likely you're going to hit a whale. Go slower, and we're really pushing that. And I think I have a slide coming up. I'm going to go ahead and go to that. Here's our update for 2022 season. 10 confirmed cases. Average overall for the last 10 seasons, 5.5. So it's definitely higher. These are small numbers of reports, but it's definitely higher. The breakdown in age class, look at it. Very typical for the overall data set. This one season is indicative. 6 calves, 1 yearling. There's your youngsters. 2 adults and 1 animal we're not sure of, okay? And 5 of them, half of them were self-reported. The party on board the boat, the captain, crew, knew they had a whale. They reported it. Okay. So here's some of the things. Again, slower is better. Have someone help you look for the whales. Be prepared at the controls. Don't take your hands off the controls. If you see a whale, let's say outside a harbor, call the other boat up or other boats up. Let them know. Okay. And then be aware of your close approaches. This by itself is not going to prevent a ship strike, but it will certainly help. So, and then this is going to introduce that 100-yard rule. So this is an actual law, not a guideline. So, and that is you cannot approach by any means. Okay. I don't care if you're a kayaker, a swimmer in the water. Federal law regulates that you do not approach that animal within 100 yards. Okay. And that holds for the drones and things of that nature as well. Okay. So by any means, hey, it's all season, it's all year out to 200 nautical miles. That's how critical this particular law is. And it's mainly about the harassment side. It's my example on trying to reduce harassment. We love these animals. They are indeed charismatic megafauna, but we can love them to death. We've got to kind of be careful there. It's all cumulative. One person's not going to make a difference, but you add it up over the day and the weeks, it can. Okay. So I wanted to address that quickly. So we have some new recommendations, by the way, not laws yet. by any means, but we want people, when you're directed at watching a whale, when you're approaching at a greater distance, 400 yards, and leaving up to 400 yards, go slower, go 6 knots, and then come up to the 14 or 15 knot speed, okay, for cruising around, and avoid the large number of boats around the animals, things like that. And again, you see the 15 knots or less around the animals if you can do it, okay. And I like to just add, be a prudent mariner, be a prudent seaman in that regard, okay. So some of the things we can do. Well, that's my quick overview on the ship strike side. I wanted to spend more time on large whale entanglements, the threat itself and how we respond to them. As Patty mentioned, they are big animals, around 40, 45 feet long and 40 tons in weight. So responding to them can be tricky. And here we go. I wanted to mention that a couple of things about entanglement threat. Obviously, it's not just whales, it's all the marine life out there. And it's not just in our backyard. It's not just Hawaii. So it's a global issue. So then again, back to many species being impacted. It is not just fishing gear. Yes, a lot of it is actively fishing gear. And then some of it is marine debris, some of it's terrestrial trash. You get the idea. I like to say it's everything and anything that's out in the water really poses a threat. It just so happens that most of what is out in the water is fishing gear, actively fishing, or it's lost, abandoned, discarded fishing gear, which falls into the marine debris category. Okay, so you see images of what a harbor seal there and some gill net, a harbor porpoise and gill net. You see a sea lion in a radial tire. So they had to dart, drug that animal and then use a sawzall to get that tire off that sea lion's head. And then the last one's a herring gull with a 6-pack holder around his neck. So that's terrestrial trash. And then I'm hoping videos will play smoothly for you guys. But and maybe I'll ask Jenny to give me an update. How are things going, Jenny?
Yeah, it looks just fine.
Cool.
Okay.
That always helps me.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
doing
you.
great.
Okay. So the video's playing. Obviously, it's a humpback whale. Patty's described that animal to us, and it's got some pretty heavy gauge gear on it. I just want to point out that these animals are so big, they typically rip the gear, whatever it is, off the ocean floor and swim off with it. And that's exactly what this whale's done. Okay. So the impact typically is not immediate for these animals. Okay. In other words, they don't typically drown. They can, but they do not typically drown. So I wanted to point out some of the other threats, the other impacts to these animals. So it is things like physical trauma. I mean, the gear can wrap up tight and can cut through the flesh. Not pretty again. Infections, they can restrict their mobility. Patty was talking about their feeding and the fact that they're gulp feeders, lunge feeders. If you're dragging gear, you're not going to do very well lunging at what can be a mobile prey item, some of the small schooling fish. So you'll starve to death. So that's the big, typically what happens. They generally just starve to death. And then there's contributory factors, which would take us back to ship strikes. Again, if you're dragging gear, you get tired, you spend more time at the surface, you have an inability to maneuver. That's a nautical term that vessels use. Well, it can apply to the whales. And under those circumstances, you are more prone to being hit by a boat. So we've seen many an entangled whale get hit by a boat, in other words. Okay. So those are some of the examples of the impacts to an entangled whale, to the animal. Okay. There's, again, starvation. Whale, humpback whale, dragging gear. You can see the scapula, the shoulder blade of the whale, some of the rib cage is showing. That is not what a whale, humpback whale, should look like. Okay. And so I did mention that this is a yearling, by the way, with its mother. The yearling is entangled above its mother. And I mentioned that they're still, even a calf for a yearling is big, and that they can drag this gear long distances over a long period of time. So again, the impact is typically not immediate. Okay. So what I'm going to get at now is the operational side. I gave you impact side, but how about us in responding? So what I'm getting at is it buys them time. They don't die immediately, and that buys us time to actually do something. The whale doctors can actually do surgery. And there's an example of video playing. That's a pole cam footage. It shows the knife making a cut on one of the wraps of an adult female humpback whale. Okay, we're going to start getting into more of these kind of video clips. I do want to point out right up front that it is not easy still. I mean, a video clip like that might make it seem easy, but there was a lot that happened prior to that, maybe 2 to 3 hours before that cut was made. And as you just saw there from that peduncle throw, you all know what a peduncle is now from Patty's portion of the talk story, is that they can throw that and it can be quite dangerous. So there was a peduncle throw. Okay, it can be dangerous. You kind of have to read your patient here. So it helps to be a whale biologist. And I wanted to point out that our goals are not entirely focused on freeing whales. Yes, we love freeing whales, and we've freed a lot of them over the years, gotten gear off of them, but it's overall risk reduction. So it is, increasing the awareness. That's Patty does a lot of that. The education side of our mission statement, the public, gaining or garnering the public awareness and reporting and response safety. Hopefully they don't go cutting whales free and get in trouble. Release some whales, yes, again, back to that. But the big one is science. It really is the science behind the effort, and that is gaining the information towards reducing the threat. That's a big one for us. I'll give you some examples of that. That's a humpback whale, by the way, the eyeball. And there's your back of your mouth. Remember, Patty drew that mouth line back under the eyeball, and then it's curving down right there, and you see the line coming out of the mouth. Okay, so there's some of the pleats, by the way, too. You can use this slide for some of our anatomy. Okay, I mentioned it's dangerous, and yet we're still doing it. And we're working under NOAA Fisheries, and this is part of my title. Remember that part of the title is long. Their Marine Mammal Health and Training Response Program. Think of it as a response program in general. Okay, and it works under permits, just like researchers do, because you might harm the whale in trying to help it. I guess doctors have the same concerns in general. So there's a permit, and our primary permit holder is Dr. Terry Rouse. And so there's Dave Matilda, by the way, our first research coordinator, and myself working with the Coast Guard. Okay, so big national program, not just Hawaii. And then here's the numbers. I gave you some of this for the ship strikes. So you got the different seasons on the x-axis, and these are the number of different cases, okay, that have been reported over the years. So you see some 8s and 11s, basically these are not big numbers, but remember, an entangled whale is one large needle in a very large haystack, the North Pacific Ocean. We are not finding them all, okay? So these are the ones we're finding and getting reports on, okay? Overall, 432 reports, about half of them confirmed, and that we think represents about 151 animals, okay, for about 2 decades worth of reporting, okay? Now, there is another way of trying to get a sense of how big this threat is, and that's the scar analysis. Hey, we're already doing fluke IDs, but take those pictures, things like looking at the body, and that upper image shows a body wrap. What was a body wrap? That animal is no longer entangled, but you can actually see the lay of line on the back of that whale, okay, where it was freed. And then the bottom one's gill net entanglement on the tail stalk. So we see in many areas anywhere from 30 to beyond 70% of the whales being entangled. It's a little lower for us, and that Hawaii skull rate's actually down to 9.7 now, a little lower than what I got there. So scar analysis, that's the general, about 1 in 5 in general over the years. And I'm going to quickly show you another graph, because it's going to show you the scar analysis we've done in Hawaii for different years. And all I want you to take home from this is that it has been decreasing over the years. I haven't done 2022 yet, this current season, but so far, other than one year, 2016, it has been decreasing. That's good news, because I think this is a better indicator than the reporting, by the way. And we'll keep going, because I wanted to give you another sense, another example of science, by the way, and another sense of how to look or how to catch and understand the impact of entanglement. See, because a report by itself can vary quite a bit. You could have a whale that's seriously injured by the entanglement. It could be tightly wrapped, and it could be cutting off the circulation to tail, and it could lose the tail. Or you could have a little bit of monofilament from someone fishing on shore that happened to catch a whale, and that's not life-threatening. So it's variable. What we're doing is looking at those cases and making determinations on just how serious that entanglement is. And we do this for the ship strikes as well. So this is really delving a little deeper. And the other thing is, maybe you don't have all the information or the outcome. You won't know how bad it is for all animals, but you might know for a certain subset of, let's say, adult humpback whales with heavy gauge line wrapped around the tail. We know from 10 cases that half of them will die. We can apply that 50% to other cases in which we only know the description of tight wraps around an adult humpback whale. And we will apply that 50% value rather than saying, well, we don't know what happened to this whale, that kind of thing. Okay. Hopefully I didn't delve too deep on that one, but I wanted you to know that there's a lot of detail here, and we really want to do our best to quantify the impacts to the animals. So, and I just threw up a graph here I thought was interesting, that because I want to introduce environmental change and how that might affect, well, the habitat, the animals, and affects the threats. And I noticed that the years in which there was a lot of warm water in the North Pacific, okay, which was affecting the food resource and affecting the animals and where they went, that the serious injury determinations were down those years. There was actually fewer for the, this is actually, remember, oh, this is entanglement. So, okay. Serious injury determinations for the animal down for those years. Okay. It's a different way of looking at it. Okay. So let's get to how we go about disentangling that, 40-ton whale that might not know you're there to help it. And I'm trying to be symbolic here, like it can be confusing, but I'm going to get you out of the water to get a clear picture of what's going on. And here we are on a rescue off of Maui. So I'm going to start you with the fact that essentially we are using an old whaling technique, and it's playing now. This is the Moby Dick. That is the, what was that? Gregory Peck version of Moby Dick. I think it's back in 1956. Okay. So it's where they threw harpoons at whales to not kill them, but to attach to them and slow them down and keep them to the surface so they could kill them. Okay. We have just modified that technique. I'm going to show you the modifications we made. We're obviously not going to throw a harpoon at the whale. We're not going to attach a barrel. That's why it was called kegging. We're not going to use wooden skiffs. Okay. We're going to update everything. We are going to use a grapple hook. Okay. So here we got a humpback whale entangled, pretty active. It's got a tail wrap. And I'm going to throw the grapple. This is helmet cam footage if it's playing right behind that whale. And I'm fishing. Okay. You can make that analogy. Herman Melville did say it was the great fish, right? So I'm attached. We are going to get our version of the Nantucket sleigh ride. I'm attached via the trailing gear. And we are going to get that Nantucket sleigh ride. The whale is probably going to dive. We're going to attach a polyball. Let's see if I added some video. Yep. So we're kegging them, modern day kegging. Okay. And here we are, Nantucket sleigh riding, helmet cam footage. And the person behind me is going to add a polyball, which is our version of the keg. So we are adding gear to get the gear off. We're going to do it very methodically with safeguards. Okay. Here is Dave Matilda and I, not being very smart, I might add. The whale wins the battle of strength, by the way. I don't care if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger or not. So we should probably be letting the kegs do the work for us and not using our muscle. In other words, sometimes the male testosterone kind of gets in our way. But here's maybe being a little smarter, pulling ourselves up behind the whale. The whale's slowing down a little bit. And now we can figure out what line to cut, maybe get the tools ready to make those cuts. And so I want to show you one of those cuts. Here is a whale. You see it stand at the surface and boom, look how easy that looked, right? That was a lot of prep, probably several hours of prep, but probably within 30 seconds, you could free the whale. Okay. If you take your time, we always say, be patient. Okay. So I'm going to give you some case histories. Let's see how we're doing on time. I think we're doing okay. Yeah. I'm going to give you some case histories.
Doing great, Ed. You're good.
Oh, I'm good. Good. Cool. Okay. So this is an adult female. She's got 5 wraps around her tail, very heavy gauge gear. This was first seen off the Big Island, and you can see that Darren Burbeck got some images of her. So first assessment, risk assessment. We've got imagery. We can tell what's going on. What's the impact? How might we cut her free? Now, this team tagged her. So I want to introduce some of the tools of the trade. They put a transmitter package on the trailing gear. She kept going around the Big Island. So let's show you. I think I'm going to show you that. Yep. Okay, so here that white line shows her going around the Big Island, She does a little jig at the north end of the big island of Hawaii and then heads to Maui. And by this time, we've got a good beat on her speed. So we get ready and we meet her at the wind line. I mean, she was right on time. I remember going, she should come out of the wind line at 7:30, and she came out of the wind line at 7:30. That was kind of cool because it gave us the entire lee of Maui to work on her, and we needed it. Okay, she was a tough one. It took quite a number of kegs to get her to slow down, stay at the surface. Eventually she did, and there's an image of that happening. You see Lee James with a pole in his hand. He's got a camera as well, so I'm going to show you what that camera got. It took 3 cuts to get her free. I think I'm going to show you 2 of them. Here's one. Here's the pole cam. Okay, it'll be left side. Okay, that's 1 cut. I think that was actually the 2nd cut, so let's show you the 3rd. Okay. Here comes the 3rd and last cut. Boom. See, there's only 1 wrap left. Okay. And that 1 wrap just came unraveled. Okay. It was only 1 wrap around the tail at that point. So, and I think here's a still image from the pole cam as it's coming out of the water. You see that last wrap coming undone. Okay. So that was totally successful mission. I'm pretty certain this female is going to survive. I'm trying to think. I don't think we've seen her again, because that's the advantage of the fluke IDs. If we can get a fluke ID, we ask the community to let us know when that whale is sighted again.
Benjamin, I am not sure where you puked up yesterday, but the smell in the bathroom is really bad.
Oh, that was not for me.
Angela, you need to mute yourself, my friend.
I muted her. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. I thought there was a question there. Okay. So I was like, the gear smells bad too. And so that's some of the gear off of the whale there. Okay. So, and there's our kegging buoys too. So some of it's kegging buoys, and the transmitter package is there as well. Okay. And then here's another female that was entangled. This is Christmas Day. I've shown you 2 Christmas Day whales, by the way. Now, what I want to point out here is the drones. They are super helpful on helping us assess. So the drone's getting a little closer. She was really evasive too. She didn't want to let us get close. And the drone showed us that it was a mouth entanglement with a single loop on the right-hand side. And remember the baleen that Patty was mentioning? Boy, if it had been woven in the whale's baleen, we would not have pulled on it. No kegging, because we would have killed the whale down the road. You know, we would have taken its feeding apparatus away from it. So that drone told us we were okay to pull, and we pulled on it, and it came right out of the whale's mouth. So it was really good news. Okay. Now here's another mouth entanglement. This is a juvenile. I think this is a juvenile male a couple of years ago. Lots of line trailing. It's not as heavy gauge, but it's big. And another one we had to keg. We did want to keg this whale. And this video is, there it goes. Okay. So we're on our Nantucket sleigh ride. Oh, there's the whale fluking. There's the fluke ID. And I'm going to tell the guys in this case, hey, let's make our cuts and let's maybe be ready to let go. She didn't go too deep, and we unraveled some line. We got some gear off, but this whale did get a little evasive and aggressive, and we had to stand down. Okay, and I think that's here it is, doing tail swishing and tail slashing, and it got a little too dangerous, and we had to tag it and go home. Now here's an interesting segue, because the next day, I've already told you about that adult with the drone, and that she was pretty easy. We just kind of pulled it from her mouth. Okay, so if you can read your animals, you can read your patient well enough, at times you know when to pull and when not to pull, kind of thing. So the next day, we tracked the whale down because it's got a transmitter package on the trailing gear that remains. Okay, and I'm like going, we're not going to pull on this whale today. So that's a different whale at the bow of the boat. We're just motoring up slowly. She's resting at depth. That's the entanglement, and we're not pulling on it. And we get right above her, and the person at the bow, Lee James and Nicole Davis, they were tending the gear. I was at the helm. They just pulled it from her mouth. They told me that she was angled up, and when they tugged on it, she opened her mouth, and they just literally pulled it out from her mouth. So the day before we were fighting her, she was like clenching down. That day, it was so easy. Let me show you a video clip. It's really cool. So here we are pulling it. That's her, the breaching whale. There's breach behavior, by the way, Patty. That is her. She's free. I don't know it yet. Lee and Nicole are still pulling the gear up, there he goes, hey, that's the end of the gear, Ed. And I'm going, holy crap, and I'm going to call, there she is again, breaching. I'm going to call the boat, support boat, and they're going to be happy. So now they know that our whale's free. Okay, so what I did there was not only tell you the general technique of freeing a whale, the kegging technique, but all those whales were carrying gear from their feeding grounds, actually. Okay, one of them had gear from British Columbia, the other two had gear from Alaska. And those red lines are real, okay, where we kind of know sometimes exactly where the gear came from. So they are carrying gear from their feeding grounds, thousands of miles. Remember how strong they are, okay? And as far as what the gear is, well, I mentioned earlier, it's everything and anything, but a lot of it is fixed gear that's set and left. Now, that can be fishing gear. Fixed fishing gear would be things like a trap, which is also called pots, by the way. So you see pots there, that's trap gear. It can be mooring gear, aquaculture, long line. Those are all fixed. And you see that most those proportions of the pies are the larger ones. Then marine debris is getting larger nowadays as well, okay? So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, give you some different case histories. I'm going to show you some of the youngsters getting tangled. This is a calf with a tight wrap around its body. Remember, Patty talked about the rich milk? Calves grow very quickly, and boy, the wraps disappear on us. So we actually had to design a new knife, a knife that could, I'm afraid to say it, had to cut into the calf a little bit. So we really wanted to be a surgeon here. We wanted to make a good cut to just get to the wrap and not harm the animal anymore. We had to. Okay, so here's the video clip of that, my helmet cam. There's the calf, just a little too far away. This is the new knife. It's sharp on both sides and on the end of the pole, and there comes the cut right there, boom. And it exploded off the calves. We did not get this gear back, but there was one frame from that camera on the pole that showed us it was monofilament. So the calf got some heavy duty, heavy test monofilament around it somehow. Okay, I'm going to switch gears to a subadult. This is a yearling. This is monofilament, but it's long line monofilament. So this is really heavy gauge monofilament. And this stuff is nasty. It's like from a pelagic long line. And you can see the damage it's done to the whale's tail or peduncle area, okay? Now, in this case, we do not keg. So I'm also giving you a quick example of another protocol where we have to cut on the fly. We cannot keg these animals. They're small, or the gear is so dangerous that if we hold on to it, we're going to do a lot of harm to the whale. It's going to cut the animal quickly. So we do not hold on, okay? So here we're going to cut on the fly, okay? Good driving, going to get me up to this yearling. I'm on it. I'm hooked in. I almost bit off more than I could chew, but come on, cut. There's the cut, okay? And if it's video's playing, you'll see we got a lot off on that attempt, okay? So, and we just kept doing that. I might show you one more. Let's see. Yep, I'm going to show you one more of the bow, down the pole cam. You can see the sharks did go after this whale for a while. Some bite marks. There's the cut. 3 wraps right there, okay? I think, yep, I went ahead and showed you the frame grab, okay? There's the 3 cuts being made. You can see there's some tissue damage, but I'm pretty certain this whale survived. In fact, I know it survived for a couple of days because some lucky diver, a scuba diver, the whale swam right by it. You got a picture of it a couple of days later. So with all the gear off, there it is. Just pieces stuck in wounds, no harm there. Oh, he's, by the way, the lucky diver was one of the sanctuary volunteers. Okay, so what I also wanted to do there for you is point out that guess what? They were all youngsters, just like the ship strikes. It's the youngsters, a lot of youngsters. So the pie diagram at 48% juveniles, that is much greater than the proportion of juveniles out there in Hawaii waters. Okay, so it's predominance of youngsters, just like the ship strikes. Okay, that's the take home there. Okay, and then I had to do this quickly, but in one slide, I just wanted to let you know that, you know, environmental changes are happening, and we did have a big one a couple of years ago. It started in 2013 and went into 2018 or almost into 2019, but predominantly around the 2015-16 season was some really warm water in the North Pacific, and it did affect the animals. And I noticed this change in the entanglements around that time. The graph shows you one example shows you that mouth entanglements were around 10% prior to that environmental change. And then afterwards, it's been up around a third of the animals since then. So happening around feeding, in other words, likely. Okay. And there's other things. There's been changes in gear, changes where they're getting entangled. So other examples. Okay. And I think what I might do is point out some of those changes in gear. And we've had more cable entanglements, moorings and anchor gear, and FADS. And FADS stands for Fish Aggregating Device. Okay, it's sort of like an aquaculture thing. You know, fish stocks are decreasing. So fishermen are pulling out the tricks. And one of them is to basically take marine debris and put it back in the water, repurpose it, make an ecosystem with that debris that's going to draw little fish in. And of course, little fish draw big fish. But that same gear poses an additional threat of entanglement. So, and by the way, that's a cable. If you're wondering why the line is standing up, it's not line. It is a type of communication cable. This was, man, 850 feet of that was trailing behind this poor animal. We got about a little over 800 of it off the whales. We got almost all of it. Okay, here's the cut. Here's the video cut. We had to get cable cutters. That's a new tool in the toolkit. So about as close as we dared get. Again, sometimes the patient doesn't understand, but we got most of it. Okay. And so I'm going to bring you to this season, and it's our, obviously the 2022 season, give you the update there. So far, we have 9 confirmed reports. So we're above average, we're not hitting a panic button, but it's pretty high numbers. Got 1 off Kauai, 1 off Oahu, 4 off Maui, and 3 off the Big Island. A yearling and 8 adult for the entanglements, a lot of adult whales this year. And then mooring gear, some debris, long line, and of course, we're still trying to figure out some of the gear. Lots of responses. We've had lots of responses, and our highest ever success rate we've gotten out of those. But basically, every animal we could respond to, we've gotten gear off. So we've been able to respond to 5 of the 9, and we've gotten gear off of all 5, and 3 of them, we got all the gear off. And of course, 1 of them was a mother with a calf. So we ended up saving the calf in the process and saving the mother. And a lot of gear, measurable, about 3,500 feet of gear removed from those animals. So it's our most productive season. I'm going to take you through a couple examples here because it's current. First one was a whale of Kauai. Look how it looked early on. This is when it was first reported. Looking kind of normal and had a lot of gear trailing. This is a good example of the drones helping us out. Okay. With that first day of effort, they got like a little over 2,000 feet of that gear off. Okay. But there was still gear on. We tagged it. And boy, that's some of the gear off the whale, by the way. Some pretty heavy gauge stuff. Okay. And then we tagged it. This whale did not want to stop. It ran all over the place. Just hard logistically to catch up to it and would go offshore where you couldn't respond. You had to turn back. We did finally get another opportunity, got some more gear off of it. In the end, I think we got about 2,300 feet of gear off that whale. Unfortunately, let me show you the image. By the time, and you can see there's not much on it now, but look at the condition of the animal now. Just a matter of weeks, that animal's covered in whale ice. It's very emaciated. I don't know if this whale is going to make it. Okay, it may not. Okay, so maybe not the happy ending there. This will be a happy ending here. This is a yearling off of Maui. A couple weeks later, tight wraps of gear around the tail. This guy did not want to stop. Okay, boy, did he not want to stop. Here we are throwing the grapple hook to try to get him to, we're going to keg him. He's old enough to be kegged. Okay, we're in there, and watch how fast this line's going, and he's running, and look how fast our transmitter package goes when it drops in. Boom, there it goes. Okay, he just did not want to stop. Okay, here we are kegging him, and we're trying to get up to him. So we never got him to slow down much, by the way. We did have to cut him under quite a bit of a movement. Okay, here is the cut. Okay, it's going to be a flying knife cut. Okay, the flying knife means it comes off the pole. So the pole's going to be cleared. Now the rope's already cut, I think. Yep, the knife is already cut. It cut pretty fast, and the yearling was free. Okay, so I want to give you some happy endings. There's the yearling swimming off of Oluwalu, Maui, went into some pretty shallow water. but we found out why the whale was trying to swim so hard. It was dragging 700 pounds. What were brake rotors. If you're wondering what that picture is, those are old brake rotors from big trucks. Okay. And I remember people will repurpose things. This likely was either a mooring or a fad. And you guys know what the fads are now. So this is big to get this off this whale. Okay. And then February 4th, we had an adult off of Maui. There's the drone footage again. And let me take you to the grapple throw. Because grapple throw, getting into that trailing gear. Now, in this case, we did not get all the gear off this whale. We got some of the trailing gear off, and that was it. So this whale, when we left it and lost it, we lost sight of it, had some gear remaining. So not always 100% successful. Okay, here's a mother with its calf. The mother's entangled. It had this like noose around its head with a bundle of debris. Okay. Now, in this case, she's an adult. We could have kegged her, but it's hard to get a hold of that. And I was thinking, if we can get a hold of it, let's just cut it. It's just one wrap. So that's what we did. We had to be very patient. We had to cut on the fly. Here comes that cut on the fly. Mother's coming up, hook knife, hook is in. It's going to be a flying knife in case we can't cut right away. So the knife is on her on the loop. I'm clearing the pole, which is overly taped to the line, by the way. We could have saved a little bit of electrical tape there. So the pole's clear and boom, Lee James just pulled and the cut is made and she's free. And that was really cool. Let me show you the happy ending here. There's mother, no wrap remaining. There's the calf, so happy, breaching next to mom. You see mom has scars now, which in the future will be some of those line scars that will show up for years to come, but she'll make it. She'll be fine. In fact, this whale we have seen for weeks now, over a month. We saw her just days ago. She is a very, very curious mother. She's been mugging all the boats, and mugging is a local term for a whale that is very curious. So you've been mugged, okay? So she and the calf have been giving people a great look. Okay, now we had this male. This is our last one. Another wrap around the head, and here comes the cut from our response boat. There's a knife on there. There's a cut made, and the male swims off as the boat follows behind. Okay, so that was a fixed knife cut versus the flying one. Okay, so that will bring you up to date. I wanted to point out that we've mounted over the years 190 responses, gear removed from 39 large whales, more than 15,000 feet of gear removed, and 75 sets. That's my example in the science department of gear being documented. You know, we're not enforcement. The sanctuary is not enforcement. Our science is about trying to figure out, hey, what are they getting caught in? Where did it come from? What part of the gear is it? We want to just help the whales figure out what it is. And if we can help fishermen, we will do so as well. Okay, they know they don't want to catch a whale. It's a team effort. So I tried to put this, I don't know, I guess is a collage here of some of the response teams together and just some of my favorite pictures. And so in that last upper left is just this last response. Okay, so cool stuff, big team effort. And the summary I have here is, the sanctuary is going to continue monitoring the whales. That's one big thing we do, along with everything else that Patty mentioned. But it's especially important with all the changes that are going on. I've noticed that every time I try to learn something, it's changing, just as fast as I can learn it. And just using me as an example. So we have a moving target, that environmental change perhaps. But we're developing partnerships. We work with the team effort again, even the science. We have a broad footprint sanctuary. I don't know, pardon that. I don't know what that is, but we're trying to work with a lot of other people and try to gain that information as broadly as we can. We work up in Alaska as well. And so we'll do our best to protect the animals in their habitats, our mission statement. And I know I told you guys a lot very quickly on entanglement threat. If you wanted to know more, I know that there are roles for the community. I mean, I'm not promoting or suggesting that you jump in a boat and go cut a whale free, but I would never do that. But people can help by reporting and by giving us that initial assessment, being first responders as appropriate. And so there is a little online course if you want to know more, and that's the address. And I can always pull this slide back up later, but it's specific to the Pacific Island region. I'm going to go ahead and move forward a little bit and just acknowledge a lot more people. And again, a lot of different agencies, state and federal involved, a lot of organizations. I had to group everyone up. I mean, the network is like 1,000 strong at least here in Hawaii. I mean, that aloha spirit is big here. Okay, so a lot of organizations, agencies. So and then with that, I wanted to thank you guys, and let's see how I did okay. Mahalo to you guys for listening, and I think we want to do a question session. I think, and maybe I should leave that for another second or so, and then I can always send this to Jenny or anyone. Okay, so I'm going to stop the presentation, stop sharing. I did it. Okay.
Oh, Ed, thank you so much. That was
You guys are
amazing.
welcome.
You know, oh yeah.
Okay, this is the gear piece of it from Kauai. Okay, so remember that 2,300 feet? So they sent this to me, and it had these rings every 100 feet or so. So it's some kind of long line or aquaculture gear. Okay, so still trying to figure it out. So these rings were every once in a while. So I'll give you a quick look at that. Okay, it's here in the room. So,
yeah, that's amazing. And we'll talk about Patty, your presentation too. But Ed, you know, you and I've seen your presentation multiple times over the years, and it always is so cool to see the progression and, you know, more of this work. And I always explain to people when I'm trying to explain what you do, I describe you, Ed, as the whale wrangler. And I just picture you in my mind. You are on, you know, this bucking boat, and you are just, you know, ready to wrangle these whales to save them. And you're like a superhero to me. And so I get so excited. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. And Patty, thank you so much. You're like the best teacher when it comes to whales. Everything I know about whales has been from you. So thank you so much. And I will add this to my collection. I think this is my third or fourth whale now with you. So I'm getting the growing collection. But let's open it up and see if anybody has any questions at all for either Patty or Ed. Go ahead, Uncle Bob.
I think it's fascinating that the whale sanctuary has boundaries and designations, which the whales don't have a clue. They're just all over anywhere, wherever. And yet us guys on the island or on the boat say, oh, well, you're in the area or you're out of the area, which is crazy. But could you differentiate what's different for in our world between someone who's in a sanctuary and who's not in a sanctuary? What do they have to do that's different?
Patty, should I take that? Some of the things, some examples? Okay. I mean, you're right in that the animals don't know the boundaries. And so especially I want to point out that the guidelines and the laws go beyond those boundaries. Many of the laws, like the 100-yard rule, will go beyond the boundary. Okay. Now, so some primary protective measures are there. Okay. And again, not all our laws. Sometimes they're just guidelines. We just ask people to adhere to them. Now, what the sanctuary can do, because we do want to share that resource and share that environment with animals and people, is that there are heavier fines within the sanctuary. So there are some heavier, what do I want to say, limits for people in that regard. So if you did something within the sanctuary boundaries, the fine might be double in certain cases, things like that. Okay. But when it comes to things like go slow or don't approach within our yards, we've done exactly what you're suggesting. We have to go beyond those boundaries. In fact, we got to go global. You got to think about their feeding grounds as well. You can't even think in regard to just breeding calving grounds. You got to think migratory route. You got to think the whole habitat. And for a whale, that habitat is global. Yep. So in a sense, certainly for a population like ours, it's Pan-Pacific, North Pacific wide. So hopefully I answered your question. Okay, I mean, give you some examples. Cool, thumbs up, excellent.
Okay, I see another, Denise, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Patty and Ed. That was super entertaining. And, you know, think I know something about whales, but now I realize I don't. So, but like you said, the more you know, the less you know. Anyway, it was really, really great. And I'm so embarrassed by my drawing. I'll show it to Jenny later. I have a million questions, but I'll try to ask two. One is, because I'm a lawyer and I teach ocean and coastal law, so I think about kind of the legal things. When it went from the approach rule, when it went from guidance to rule, did it make any difference in your lives, or, you know, that you're aware of, you know, when it went from being a guideline to actually a rule? So that's kind of a little bit of a legal question, but, you know, has that made any difference? I think that was 2016-ish, 2017-ish. And then my other question is marine debris. This is a more general question. If you had a magic wand, Patty and Ed, what would you do that would, in terms of marine debris, that would help the whales the most? You can answer either one or neither.
Okay, well, Patty, should I start tag team with
Yep.
me? Okay,
Go for it.
Okay. I'll start with the latter question there. I wrote down the first one so I don't forget. With the marine debris, if you specifically mean marine debris, so in other words, we don't know what it is, it can be anything and everything, then I would argue the big one is to figure out what it is so that you get to the source, to identifying it. So you don't just keep labeling it marine debris, which is really just a catch-all. And that doesn't help us much in solving the problem. And then hopefully I emphasize how important that was to try to towards solving the problem. We're not going to eliminate the whole threat entirely, but if we can chip away at it, take 5% here, 10% there, that's big. Now, the other part of this, in identifying, if you're not referring to marine debris specifically as marine debris, but maybe as fishing gear kind of thing, something that's fished, then things like fishing differently or fishing with different gear. So for instance, the job I had before the sanctuary was trying to come up with a better sinking line. Fishermen didn't really want to use sinking line in many cases because line is sold by weight. So sinking line was more expensive. Sinking line laid on the bottom, where you get caught in the rocks or whatever. It laid in the sand, and the sand got in the lay of the line and ate it up faster. It didn't last as long. So there was all these negatives towards what a fisherman thought was bad to use sinking line. But for a whale entanglement or entanglement in general, sinking line was better. It got it out of the water column. In fact, I can give you this number. In the Gulf of Maine, I don't know it around here, but in the Gulf of Maine, back east, with the lobster fishery, as big as it is in the Gulf of Maine, if they could remove all the floating line between traps, it would represent 40% reduction in the amount of line in the water column. Boy, talk about the potential. That's a big chunk of the risk factor there. Okay, so that's more specific for you, Denise, okay? Hopefully I've given you some good examples in that regard. Patty, anything to add? I didn't want to monopolize you or anything. You good?
Nope.
Okay.
Keep going. Yep.
Okay. Then the other question Denise had was about the 100-yard rule. And boy, there's a lot of history there with the 100-yard rule. It actually, the legal side of it goes back well beyond 2016 in a sense, but there's a little hiccup here that I'm going to give you. I don't remember the exact year it came up. Now, first it was proposed as 300 yards, and that stuck for mothers and calves for a while. But then it gravitated back to 100 yards. Enforcement agencies thought 100 yards, keep it simple. And 100 yards is the football field thing. They thought people could understand that and be easier to enforce and easier for people to do. But in 2016, I think Denise's point, well, that rule was under the Endangered Species Act, okay? And in 2016, our humpback whales here were taken off the Endangered Species Act. They were delisted. We looked at the population and said, hey, you're doing okay. You've been generally increasing in numbers. Yeah, there are risk factors still. You're still getting tangled. You're still getting hit by boats, all that. But your numbers overall good. So they took them off. And so suddenly the 100-yard rule was at risk. It was going to be removed. It was going to be taken away. And a lot of people, us included, said, that is a good basic rule to the gentleman's point, what can you do to help protect these animals? And that one we wanted that basic rule again, all year long, 200 miles offshore. Okay. And so it got attached to the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And Denise probably knows more about this. This is the legal kind of stuff that I don't maybe pay attention to, but we got it going again by attaching it to another statute that protected all marine mammals, right? Most of them, sorry, in US waters. And that was the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So that 100-yard rule lives on. Okay. I don't know if I did a good job with that, Denise, but that's fine.
Very good. Wonderful explanation. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Go ahead, Hiroko.
Hi, I'm Hiroko, and thank you so much. This is just fantastic presentation. And Jenny, thank you so much for organizing it. I have two questions. The number one, Ed mentioned about the community help for watching from the entanglement, but I follow the Honu and albatross in North Shore, and those are much easier to watch. How can the community help? Because it's far, far, far away on the horizon, unless you're on the boat. How can I get involved? And I really like to take your online classes too, that I'm so passionate to saving those animals.
I gotcha. And you're right. People that are on shore are going to be a little bit more challenged. Okay, it is more challenging. It is easier to be a first responder when you're on a boat that can get up to 100 yards. Right, first responders don't get to break the rule either. But people have helped from shore. I mean, we've gotten the story of the adult female with the 5 wraps on her tail. That came from a woman on her lanai on the what's the northeast shoreline of the Big Island called? I forgot it, but she was there and she spotted it from her lanai and called it in. And so you can do it. Okay, it's just not as likely. Okay, and yeah, and that course is good. It's 20 minutes, by the way. It's not too long. It'll give you the do's and don'ts. It'll give you the basics. The community is big, no doubt. I truly have to acknowledge the community because I'm not finding these whales. In Hawaii, I've never come across an entangled whale myself. It's always been a fisherman, a tour boat operator, and another researcher. Always. Right. Okay.
That'd be great. If you can send me the link, Jenny, I would appreciate it. And then also,
got it. She's on it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Pat, I'm the educator too, and I really believe in reach out for the younger generation to look out what you want to find. I'm sorry. And I was wondering that how can we organize the volunteership? I am in checking in HMAR, NOAA, Marine Biology Center in Kaneohe. I'm trying to go all over the place. And isn't there anything that we can do together to support for all the organization in one line? And then you can branch out. Now I'm going from the bottom up. Where do I go? And I want to help, but I'm just at a loss at this moment. And then because of COVID too, Jenny, that your activity has been halted too. And I wanted to do something more rather than always listening to the webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, Patty, it might be more up your alley, right?
Yeah, I think what you're asking here is how do you get involved in these different organizations? And it really would be contacting. It's like there's the Monk Seal group, there's the Honu group that take the volunteers. And you probably know about those. That's the best way for you guys to volunteer. I know over here on Maui, they're really looking for folks right now, especially for the monk seals. Right. But, they constantly need people to be out on the beach, educating people and talking to them about what they need to know. So you don't have contacts to those organizations. Either Jenny probably has them or I can give it to her of how you contact those different.
As a school teacher, I worked in Punahou and different area. I didn't do the marine biology, but if government or community has something, one organization, and underneath there is the Campbell's, there is a Malamanahonu, there's a Jenny's one. Then we can get really the basic idea in the big organization and then branched out rather than going all over the place to find out.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, that's
know-
a great idea. It's a tough one. And I know what you're saying, Hiroko. It's even us as groups that do this kind of work. We sometimes, have a hard time finding each other too. So networking like this is really important as well.
Right.
And we agree with you. Yeah, and definitely we'll be getting back in action this year. That hopefully. So we'll keep you posted on that too.
Thank you. Oh, and I have one more last question. I'm following the albatross in North Shore. And because of the climate change and because of the wind shift, that we don't have that many birds coming, or the parents, after laying the egg, deliver the chick hatched and went off to get the squid somewhere, but there is no strong wind, so they are not coming back that often. Is there the same thing happening, climate change for migration in Wales?
So sorry, it was climate change with whales?
Climate change affect the migration of the whales from Alaska to Hawaii?
Yes and no, in the sense that we think, excellent question, by the way. We think that many a whale, when the climate change impacts, like changing their food source, the amount of it, the quality of it, or they have to go further north to get to it, will affect their energetics, the ability for them to get here. Okay, so that was my fuel tank analogy. I'm not sure if it was very good, but your fuel tank, your health, your condition is not as good. Very key for the females, by the way. The females are going to be smart. They're going to log themselves or be smart about their migration. So a female who's not ready will not come here. Okay, she'll keep feeding all winter long up in Alaska, let's say. Okay, she'll skip a couple of years. Maybe she was doing every second year, every third year she went to Hawaii. Maybe it's every 4 years in these bad years. Now the males, we think, by the way, they're coming for the party, and maybe it's a terrible analogy, and they will probably try to come, but because their fuel tanks are low, they might have normally spent 4 weeks, maybe they only spend 2 weeks, that kind of thing. Okay, because it's a rotating door. They're coming and going all the time. Just so happens the peak is in January, February. Okay, and so there's an effect. I mean, and for us, we see things like when we don't see the females and we see the males staying less time, we see it as fewer whales out there. Because remember, not everyone's doing their fluke IDs in their head, kind of thing, going, registering that. We're not that good. So that would be a good example. How's that? That was one example. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Hiroko. Okay, Uncle Bob, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Related to the whales coming down, they did some counts a couple of years ago in the Papahanaumokuatea and found there were quite a few whales in that area. And I suppose the question is, were they just hanging out up there for a while, or was that their destination, or do they continue to come on down to the main islands? Has anybody made a determination on that?
As far as I know, Uncle Bob, a little bit of everything there, a little bit of all of the above. In general, we think, at least, they've been doing that for like decades, right? They've been in the Papahanaumokuatea for decades. It's just that we didn't have that much effort, back to the example of effort, and so we're having more effort. That means we're seeing them more often now. So some of those animals we know are moving back and forth between the main Hawaiian Islands and the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Some of them, we think it's another example of maybe my fuel tank's not as full these days. And by going to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, you've just cut off maybe 800 miles or more one way. So you just saved yourself some mileage and helped you on the energetic side. So it's another example. And that's all I can do here, because we don't have all the answers. All I can say is this is some of the evidence, and these are some examples of what might be happening or is likely happening. So, and I know we've tagged some whales, some entangled whales, off of Kauai, and they've jumped up to like the initial part of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So, yep. So small data set there, but some examples.
Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Bob. That was a good question. That brings me to another question. Patty, you had mentioned, or both of you mentioned, it's kind of been an active whale season this year. Do you know, either of you, if we have any North Shore specific numbers? I know the official whale count is the last Saturday of January, February, March, and just this past weekend we had our, or did it happen? It happened. The last whale count, we saw them out there. We had a group at the same time, so we waved. Do we know, how's it been this season on the North Shore?
I can get that information from Cindy for you. I don't know what the actual numbers are. I know, especially this weekend, the reports that I heard was that there were a lot more that we're seeing down here in Maui. I know Kauai had, I think maybe it was weather, whatever, we're basically not seeing much at all. So I will ask Cindy and email you that information, because I don't know what the numbers were, but
that would be great. I would love to know, because I would love to be able to share that information out to our community. We, you know, just from my kilo perspective, my perspective of observation, just from shore, there seemed to be a lot of activity. And in fact, there's been this sort of popularity of whales liking to drop into the pipeline surf lineup. And so they'll sit out right behind the breaking 15, 20-foot barrels where guys are dropping in, and literally right behind them, whales are breaching and pectoral slabs and hanging out all day. So they're being photographed a lot, and you know, we're seeing it a lot. And so, so yeah, thank you. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. I'll try to find some clips and send it to you guys so you guys can see it.
That's really cool. I will check with her and send that to you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
See a lot in Turtle Bay side too, Marconi, Turtle Bay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing, is our Marine Life Conservation District waters butt up against whale sanctuary waters, you know, that invisible line. But we jokingly say that right out here on the North Shore is the whale freeway. And so we see it quite a lot. We haven't seen Ed go by in, you know, wrangling. Uncle Bob, one last question. Oh, you're muted, Uncle Bob.
With regard to the whales transiting out here on the North Shore, I'm wondering, as you go out, there's a 40-foot ledge, and then there's a 180-foot drop off. And then as you get out farther, obviously it slopes down and gets deeper and deeper. Is there a preferred benthic topography that they try to parallel or maintain? Is it about the depth or within, or just kind of where they like to be in the water column? What determines how far from shore they are? This is the other way to ask the question. I noticed that about 3/4 of the ones are in a similar zone, and then about 1/4 of them are like 2 or 3 times farther out. But it's just an interesting observation. Probably didn't have any bearing on anything, but I'm curious about it.
I guess Patty or I could take this one to a certain degree.
Go ahead, Ed. Yeah.
Okay. Well, generally they like 100 fathoms or less, 100 fathoms 6 feet. So 600 feet or less, generally speaking. It seems to be somewhat of a magic number. It's why the sanctuary boundaries are at the 100 fathom mark and some of the coastal waters. And we've noticed around here, Uncle Bob, that like the mothers and calves, especially the younger calves when they're young, early on, like the very shallow waters, you know, like 100 feet or less, so closer to shore, maybe some of your closer, lower depth contour lines you were talking about. I don't know if they were more mothers and calves in that regard for your observations. Okay, well, for us, it generally, and I have the advantage of going out in the water and looking at them, and so I get to know that, maybe find that out. But there's that. And then the other animals are a little further offshore. So we have our mother calf alley. I think someone was talking about that, and we have that here. So, and
they saw a lot. Yeah, in the last couple of, I've been at the sanctuary for the whale count for all 3 months here, and we're right on the water, and Ma'alai Harbor's right here, and it's not very deep, I don't think, out there, Ed. But lots of mothers and calves, and lots of calf interactions, and things going on. More I've heard this year than other years of what they are seeing with that. So it's again, they're in close in here in Ma'alaya Harbor, and maybe it is a sheltered. They realize it is kind of a sheltered place, or not, or they're in the alley and don't know.
Yep.
Yeah,
They are. Mālama
a
Harbor is
playground.
very popular. It's
Yeah.
shallow. The calf we checked on, again, I don't think the little guy made it, but the calf we checked on Sunday was right outside the harbor, Mālama Harbor. It was,
Yeah.
not a good spot in some ways, traffic wise, vessel traffic wise. But that's, otherwise that's good. And I think part of it is mothers. I think one of the advantages of coming here to Hawaii is clear water and warm water, energetic wise, for the calf to grow, get big fast. You become less of a morsel for a shark or a killer whale that Patty mentioned. But mothers can watch them. And if you've got less depth, you can watch for predators. There's less water to look for, less water to be surprised by, or a shark to come up and grab your calf and, that kind of thing. So for Junior to get away from you.
And whether it makes any difference or not, in the harbor, in Ma'alaya Harbor and out in front of the sanctuary and going down, the Kihei beaches, it's usually pretty calm, especially mornings. We don't have the big waves. It's calm water. One of the problems that we see around here is so many stand-up paddleboarders and the kayakers that are out, and they can go way out in the water here, and with some interaction with the whales. And we have a team that is out there. They've been out this last couple of weeks in kayaks. They are trained sanctuary folks that are out there just interacting with people that are in the up close. It's real easy to get up close to them in this area. And again, maybe it's because it's calm is one thing that brings them in.
I agree, Patty. If you ever seen a newborn humpback whale calf take its first breath or early breaths, they're not very coordinated. They are the toddlers, and they'll come up to the surface and they'll hump too soon. So here's their blowhole with the knuckle, and they're arching here, and then the little butts come up, and then they lift their head up and take a breath. So they're learning how to do the hump. They haven't figured it out. They're 1-ton toddlers. So calm seas are a big plus for a 1-ton toddler.
That makes sense. Thank you for that. I see one last question from Denise, and then we have a comment from Paula Kiko, and then we'll end there.
Thanks. I actually want to ask something that just builds on what we were just talking about, which is the opportunity to observe whales. And is there, in terms of people getting on boats or paddle boards or whatever, is there either guidance for particular companies, or is there a certification for kind of safe watching? Where do people go other than, just advertising, that they can be sure that the sanctuary says, yeah, this is an okay company or way to do it?
I don't think we have any kind of accreditation program or anything. And because we don't have anything formal like that, we need to be careful of, pointing out certain companies, because that's not appropriate for us in our role. I would argue going onto their websites, and you can tell a lot about a company and their role, their strategies out there, and what they do, what they support. There are many companies out there that do more than just the commercial side of it. They have their fingers in the conservation cookie jar, if you will. And you can see that on their websites, and that's one way of doing it, kind of get a sense of how conservation oriented they are. But you can do that. We wouldn't be able to tell you that directly.
Yeah, but Ed does do every year some trainings with all of this offered to all of the boat companies, all the ocean users that are out there, and offers these trainings that reminds them of the distance and what they can do and how to approach and not to approach. And we do have our OLE, which is our NOAA officers, that they've been hanging out on Maui. They tend to spend whale season over here because there's so many out there, and they are out policing the waters, and they get reports of people getting too close. I actually gave them paperwork the other day on a kayaker that was fined here on Maui for being too close. So that that's something that the public can do, and they do over. We call them the condo police over here, because the condos in Kihei are so close to the water, and they all sit on their decks and they're watching the whales in the morning, and they're watching the boats approach. And now that they've got all these digital cameras and GoPros and things, taking pictures of the boat and the number on the boat. And if they get that image, we take that, we can turn it over to the OLE guys. They go after them and they question them and remind them what to do, not to do, etc. And they also go out as secret shoppers on some of the big boats, and they are watching what's going on. If we get reports of a certain company that's getting too close to the whales, they will go out and remind them of what's going on, watch what's going on. And so the big companies, I think, are pretty good about paying attention to what it is. It's more the over here on Maui, it's more the kayakers and the paddlers and those guys that are out and they're looking for the pictures, and sometimes they're just too close and they can't go anywhere. Friend of mine he kayaked between paddled between here in Molokai a couple weekends ago, and he said they had to stop. It was early in the morning. They had to literally stop and sit still. They were surrounded by moms and babies and whales that were out there. And he said it was actually scary. And he said we just had to sit still, couldn't go anywhere. That's there. So they're aware of it. I have the OLE guys, which are our law enforcement, actually meet with the paddling groups and with kayakers to again remind them. And a lot of it's just, guys, don't be stupid. These are huge whales. That tail comes up and hits you, you're in trouble. So there is a lot of education that goes out, that we try to do. And like I said, I think a lot of the companies really are, the big companies are really trying to follow the rules and do it, and which is good. It's a good thing that, it's a great thing that Ed gets out there and does that every season as we get started, either in person or virtually. We try to get that message out. So yeah, good question though.
Thank you, Patty. Okay, well, I just want to again thank both of you for being here. I learned so much, and this is so awesome. And from myself, Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea, Denise, who's our board president, Uncle Bob, who's also on our board, I'm going to leave it, so mahalo. I'm going to leave it with Palakiko, who is on our advisory board, and my husband. And Palakiko, would you come on camera for a second? Patty, you mentioned earlier about the blowhole, the nostrils, and you asked if there's anybody that he can.
He can.
And I want him to show you, yes. Palakiko, can you please show?
I just wanted to say mahalo to, Patty and Ed. Thank you for everything that you guys do. You guys are our heroes, that's no lie. I did want to say, I saw a baby whale being born off of Ma'alaya.
Wow.
And what is so funny, people would tell me, yeah, right. But Ed, he fully described it, how the baby's uncoordinated when it comes up to the water. Like when I seen it, it seemed like the mother was under the baby and pushing it up, and then it would roll off of the mother, and then the mother would go back under again. I know what I saw, guys. I know what I saw. I'm not stupid. And people tell me no ways. And you know what? There you go. I just had a marine biologist, if not the most important marine biologist, Mr. Ed Lyman, tell me what I saw was a baby being born. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. And then Patty, this one is for you. I cannot really come on screen because my wife told me to use a shirt and I refuse. I refuse to use a shirt. So I'm just coming on with my face because I wanted to show you how I close my nose when I go body surfing. So the water doesn't go up my nose. It's just like a seal or a whale from what you were explaining. So, mahalo, thank you again. But this is what it looks like, Patty. It looks like this, look.
He can actually close his nose with his upper lip.
Uncle Bob can't do that because he has a beard in his way. So Uncle Bob can't do that, but I can.
That is so cool. And I've got 100 kids coming in on Friday and going to do some of this lecture with them. I'm going to have them try it with their upper lip saying, I saw it done. That can happen. You're the first one to tell me that could happen. Thank you. That's awesome. You made my day here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Mahalo so much. Mahalo.
Bye, everybody.